off again. But it's the time here is 8 p.m. and in New Zealand, what time is it where you are?
We're 9 a.m.
Oh, good man.
Yeah, we're 13 hours into the future. So yeah. And it's looking okay. Just to let you know.
What happened overnight? Can you give us a clue?
It was fairly dark. Yeah, not a lot. Yeah, it's fairly settled.
Okay, there was no news. Okay, very good. And so we didn't get you out of bed too early at 9 a.m. That's almost acceptable hour to be tasting or at least or drinking or at least tasting wine. So you have some wines with you there, have you, Dom?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've got at least half of the wines here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to tasting those with everyone as we go through. So certainly 9 o'clock is not that early for a winemaker. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable.
Good man, exactly. And as we were saying earlier, we missed you on tour. Everyone missed tour being together, and you had done 2 at least winter tours, had you? Where we do it in November.
Yeah. 2 or 3 winter tours and 1 summer tour as well. So yeah, you really, I mean, it's such an amazing time bringing people together, that face-to-face time. But it's always incredible how I got to know angels, because there's so many of them. And initially I thought, well, maybe that relationship, will be hard to get some real depth to. But it's not long before, they've posted a couple of times on your wines. And then as soon as you meet them face to face, that's it. So that relationship's formed. And then also with all of you guys and the staff, it's certainly something I missed this year. And hopefully we can do it next year. I think we're all thinking along those lines. So I'm sure we can.
Yeah, we're all up for it. No, it's a fantastic community, Naked, with whether it's the winemakers and the staff, but generally all the angels that contribute and share their feedback on the wall, and the winemakers that also respond. We're fortunate for this community. And currently we are live on Zoom. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. So welcome everybody. It's a real treat to have Dom. Dom and I've a lot of time for you, Dom. I love sitting with you on the tour bus, hanging out with you, walking with you, talking with you, talking about wines with you, at different hours of, the other sides of the world. And so this is an hour where we get to share our little geek fest with everybody else. And I think the way I would envisage we could walk through this evening would be, whilst you make fantastic Sauvignon Blanc, as do other winemakers, and we'll quickly touch on your Sauvignon Blanc, it'd be great to get an understanding, or if you could share with us a bit of an educational piece on the other white grape varieties in New Zealand that you have managed to hone and master, really. And that's your Pinot Gris, the Riesling, the Gewürztraminer, and then of course the eponymous, the Bloom. And so we'll taste through those wines. It'd just be great to get a little slow down, a bit of information on each of them. So welcome everyone who's tuned in. Dom is joining us from the land of the long white cloud, and we have, just to sort of put it back where it began, Dom, I think it was 2016. 4,000. First of all, we were contacted by Rod Easthope, and he put us in touch. He said, there's this talented winemaker. You had already won Young Winemaker of the Year, Winemaker of the Year of New Zealand in 2011. You went on and did it again in 2018, which must be embarrassing for you by this stage. And but that's it, 4,000 angels backed you to make wine for Naked, and we raised £200,000 in this campaign that actually went viral. It was through all social media. So how did that feel at the time, knowing that there was this movement behind you, and equally that you were expected to deliver on?
Yeah, an amazing ride. Put shortly, but to be honest, it was my first foray into anything with Naked, so I didn't know what to expect, and I tend to just dive into things and deal with things as they happen. So I hadn't kind of pre-thought about how big the whole thing was going to get, and it actually coincided with the start of harvest 2016. So you know, for anyone who can think about kind of working 12 to 18 hours a day, you know, you're so in the zone physically and mentally. And I think actually that was a really good thing to be going through at the same time, because it was a huge wave of support from all the angels and the staff, contributing towards this initial fund to get the first lot of wines off the ground. Yeah, I'm not someone who likes a lot of limelight, and to be honest, you know, it was kind of it was fairly full on, and so to have this other distraction of making the wine was actually something that I could just concentrate on. And then when I'd stop for a moment, have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I'd check my emails, and there'd be another 150 you know, comments or people contributing to the cause. It was a little oh my god, this thing's growing and happening, and you know, so I was kind of doing both things at the same time, you know, trying to comment and get back to all these incredible angels, as well as actually at the same time getting out to the vineyard, picking grapes, fermenting grapes for the people that were contributing right there and then. So there was a lot of faith put in me, and you know, it's been a huge ride, and you know, I've just enjoyed every moment of it. But the fact that people are willing to take you know, your word on things, and you know, you've discovered someone down under, they're worth trying. So it just speaks volumes for what they've been offered in the past. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to think that was 4 years ago, because it seems like it's gone by in a flash of an eye. But I always think about it in seasons, and you know, we've had the 16 vintage, which was beautiful, the 17, which was cool, the 18, which was warm, 19, which was really mild, and then 20, which was lovely and even. And so I kind of I think about things in seasons like that. So yeah, we've had 5 completely different but amazing vintages in their own way. And for those angels that were there back in 2016 and have tasted each of those vintages, I really feel like they'll now be getting a nice picture on the journey we take as winemakers.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of looking at it. And one of your wines, the Bloom, I mean, that was an early inception, so maybe that might have been 17, but that has become almost cult-like and has a following, and there's a never miss out if you want to sign up to it. But it was a brave inception of putting everything together, let's say, and people responded to it. And I think to take that leap of faith from people, angels, that basically they had bought into you. You made Sauvignon Blanc and you made a Pinot Noir. I think we had maybe a Pinot Gris, and they just went, okay, he's put this whole smorgasbord of grapes together, and sure, I trust him and I back him. And that wine is just, you know, stratospheric. It's incredible, and we're going to taste it later. But you know, I think it speaks volumes to the backing, but also there is the delivery, Tom, because we work with a lot of winemakers from around the world. Hopefully they're all great, but really yours have stood out as consistent and sublime, and so it's testament to your quality. Okay, let's just clarify for everyone. You're in New Zealand. Where exactly in New Zealand are you? People might be familiar with Marlborough, which is the top of the South Island. Where are you?
Yeah, so I live in a small village called Leithfield, and the wine region that I work in is North Canterbury, otherwise known as Wyatta. Wyatta means muddy water, effectively. Wai is water, para is sediment in Māori. We often refer to it as North Canterbury because it's a little easier to understand internationally, because there's a lot of Wais in New Zealand because we have a lot of water. So there's and this region is about 10 minutes north of me here in Leithfield, and it's about 3/4 of an hour north of Christchurch. Christchurch is the main city in the South Island on the east coast, and we sit about 3.5 hours south of Marlborough. And so Marlborough is, excuse me, rightly known for producing, you know, so many of New Zealand's you know, exuberant wines, and it's where the real horsepower of the industry is. Obviously, some lovely Sauvignon from Marlborough, but other varieties too. And then as you come south, we have a slightly different climate, but also quite different soils and quite a range of soils. So, you know, as you may have heard people, winemakers, grape growers talk about, well, terroir, or in New Zealand we call it turanga waiwai, which is the place where we put our feet. And that is really a combination of, you know, the geology of the place, but also the climate of the place, not to mention the people's impact, which is a big thing as well. So yeah, we're south of Marlborough, and we account for, depending on the vintage, anywhere from sort of 2.5 to 4% of New Zealand's crush of grapes per vintage. So we're a small region, and I'm a small producer in a small region. So you're really getting a taste of something very niche out in New Zealand. But you know, hopefully it's a nice experience for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dom, I'm going to put you on the spot, but perhaps, I know you're off to Wellington later today, but it'd be great if you could share on your wall, just put a post up and give us the name of the Kiwi, the Maori name, sorry, of terroir, and just a little bit about that, where we lay our feet. It's a beautiful concept I hadn't heard before, and it's very, you know, it's informative and something that we should cling on to, because there are clearly differentiations between the Sauvignon Blanc that you make where you are and Marlborough, and then a slight difference again from where Rod Easthope is in Hawke's Bay in the north. Could you sort of summarize in brief how, say, Bill and Claudia and yours and Mike's and Rod's differ?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with Marlborough, because it's probably the most well-known. Typified by what we call thiols, methoxypyrazine. So that's really a lot of aromatic intensity, and also notable acidity on the palate. And when done right, like the guys that are on Naked, that acidity is long and really fruit-driven. But it's a big factor in the wine. Rod is further north, so he deals with a warmer climate, warmer nights, different soils as well. So his Sauvignon will have a little more body, and the aromatics will be from Hawke's Bay anyway, will be more of the riper fruit spectrum, so less of the herbal elements which might come into it in Marlborough. And then as you go south of Marlborough, so the other direction to Rod's, in North Canterbury where I am, our Sauvignon is growing on a mixture of soils, so clay and gravel. And typically we have quite a windy climate, and that combination tends to translate into smaller berries, thicker skins, so perhaps more of we call it phenolics coming through in the wine. But another word for it perhaps is structure. So whereas Marlborough could be driven by acidity, ours tends to have slightly lower acidity, a little softer on the palate from that point of view. But because of that structure, makes it really good Sauvignon for food pairing. And that's where we see a big, I guess, differentiating factor for our wines, is that structure and texture lends itself well to food.
That's perfect. Yeah, great. So Marlborough, which lots of people have heard of, more racy, linear, fresh, vibrant. Yours a bit more complete, rounded, textural. So there's two sort of elements of Sauvignon Blanc in the South Island of New Zealand. That's very useful. Yeah. I think we'll get straight into drinking wine, if that's okay, because it's Tuesday and it's winter. And
absolutely.
Now, many people who are attending will have already got their hands on a mixed case to taste along. But I just wanted to preview, before we go into those wines, which we'll go through them individually. This is your brand new, which I got a sneaky bottle sent on to me. This is the Wyatta Pinot Gris, and this is pre-order, which pre-order is going live tonight. I think we're going to put a link up there, and you can go to the pre-order page on the website. So This is a new Pinot Gris. I think it's $8.99 Angels. So Dom, what's the crackerjack with this wine?
Yeah, so Wyatta is a vineyard at the south of the valley in Waipara. Wyatta stands or means to sing in Māori. So the owners of this vineyard are Māori, and obviously, you know, that's important to them. And when you think about to sing as a grape grower and a winemaker, you really want the wine to speak of the place, or to sing. And sometimes people say that really sings, you know. And so if it has a sense of place, then we think that's doing the job. So Wyatta really refers to what we want from the place. So it's a vineyard that I've had a good relationship with since the very first vintage, 2016 with Naked. And I've always purchased fruit off them. And it's been Sauvignon, a bit of Pinot Gris. Sometimes I can get Gewürztraminer off them as well. It's fairly low cropping. So it's a great relationship that I've had going on. And depending on the vintage, I might have an opportunity to pick up a little bit more fruit. 2020 was a lovely vintage, so I was keen to, you know, very pure and clean. And they were willing to sell me a bit more fruit. So it was an opportunity really that I couldn't pass up, you know. And again, with your backing, was able to do that. And I really like working with the fruit from that vineyard because it is so clear and pure, you know. It has a real ability to express fruit. And I think for $8.99, what we really want to do is really express that Pinot Gris fruit, you know, provide lovely varietal character. And I think, you know, the Wyatta Pinot Gris really does that nicely.
Yeah, it's better than I remembered in the early days. I think you sent me a sample. It would have been July, I think. So your harvest is say March, April. Then first sort of early look at it, and we were in lockdown, I think, and stuck here, and it looked great. But now it's just poof, the palate is opening up. I mean, it really punches above its weight. I think the texture is round and viscous and delicious, but the fruit, as you were saying, it's crystalline, maybe green gauge, maybe citrus, but it's still like it's got or a honeydew melon as well. So it's anyway, that's delicious. That will be delivered, I think, in January or early in the new year. But if you're interested, I think there's a link in the chat, and you can do a pre-order on that. But that's crackerjack, and also really, really good to hear about the provenance and the people that you're working with, and your loyalty and like the mutual loyalty there. So can we kick off with a wine that I think lots of people will have at home? This is your my camera. I need to sharpen up my camera. But this is your Pinot Gris 2020, the regular Pinot Gris. Have you got that with you as well, Dom?
I don't have the Pinot Gris, no, unfortunately, but I do remember it very well. Yeah, I've got the bloom and the Riesling out of the whites. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you all about it. So I guess if you, while you're sharing a sort of or contextualizing Pinot Gris in New Zealand versus, say, Pinot Gris in Alsace, and let's also include Italy, Pinot Grigio. I'll have a taste, and then I'll share my sort of thoughts, and it'd be great to get everyone else's thoughts. If you've already drunk it at home, or if you have it on the go, just throw it into the chat room. It'd be great to hear everyone's thoughts on it. So Dom, like either inspiration or where does Pinot Gris from New Zealand sit?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's its own thing to a large degree, but personally, I look more towards Alsace than I do northern Italy, and I think you know, that's just in recognizing what the fruit does naturally here. So naturally, the fruit has a lot of texture here. You know, it has a lot of flavor. Acidity is relatively low for a white wine here in New Zealand, and so automatically if you bundle those things together, there's a textural element to the wine, and a real approachability to the wine as well. northern Italy will be a little lighter, and no doubt refreshing, but more of that zippier sort of style, certainly lighter. Alsatian Pinot Gris will take that textural element to another level, perhaps, and can sometimes be, quite unctuous and very rich. Again, beautiful in its own style. Whereas I think in New Zealand, we tend to tread a line between them. But something that comes through in New Zealand is really the freshness of fruit, and it's almost regardless of the variety. But I think with Pinot Gris, it's especially good because it can be quite a neutral variety. When you're tasting fruit in the vineyard, there's a definite point where flavour comes into the fruit, and that's where we go, right, we're going to pick here. But it can be quite neutral before then. And so to have that real fruit element shining through, because we live in this climate where we have, good sunshine hours and cool nights, which help to preserve that fruit freshness, that really allows it to speak out. But I mean, what I like to do, and what a lot of Pinot Gris producers like to do in New Zealand, is just allow that fruit to speak, but actually try and get a little more of the natural complexity of Pinot Gris to come in. And so for me, I think about baking spices as a big thing. So cinnamon, cloves, those sort of things that really help to balance that fruit and also contribute towards, again, lending itself to food. So and that can be done in a variety of ways, which so I like to, once fermentation has finished, the wine naturally settles, and it settles on a layer of lees or sediment in the bottom of the tank, and that's gold at the bottom. If that is nice fresh lees at the bottom of the tank, then that can really be used to a winemaker's advantage to contribute some of these other more nuanced complexities, and it can even develop into a slight sort of creaminess. So depending on how long you leave the wine sitting on the lees, or if you want to stir up the lees, then you really start to get some of those characters coming through, which we do a bit of for this wine.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. While I was drinking, I was thinking like a ginger spice, but you said baking spices, and it's cinnamon, ginger, and it just sitting on top of some nice honeydew melon, some nice primary fruit characters, but it is what gives it sort of an individuality. And if you start thinking about a wine like Albarino or Verdecco or wines from Europe that we taste often, this has just an extra dimension with texture, viscosity, and a breadth of flavors. And it's really good to understand that it's coming from this sediment and the time on that. And I mean, that surely is where winemaking skill comes in. Whether is it a risk, or like for how long, or how do you know that like that sediment is going to bring me greatness, or is it going to bring me heartache?
Yeah, you're right. And there's only one way to learn, and that's to give things a go. But obviously, part of being a winemaker is sometimes just watching and tasting, and it can be once, twice a day. This is even after vintage is finished. Tasting a tank, tasting the top of the tank, the bottom of the tank, and it will change. It just sits in this tank, and you think it's sealed up, it's not going to evolve, but it really does, much the same way, or different, but in a similar way to how it evolves in the bottle. The wine will continue to change because to a degree they're a living thing with lots of molecules interacting with each other, and so it really is about making sure that you're just watching and tasting, and then of course you make that decision to take it off lees, but the wine will still continue to evolve. So it's kind of small steps towards things, and it's why I think working with the same vineyard is beneficial as well. It really gives you an understanding of how that juice, how that wine responds to your winemaking in the winery.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's go to the bloom, which, I mean, this is, I don't know, I've I fell in love with it before you'd even made it. It was this sort of discussion we had back in the day of, I don't know, you wanted to play with a couple of grape varieties, and in the end you produced something that I don't think any of us at Naked had ever tasted before. Remind us what the grape varieties of the bloom are.
Yeah, so in almost equal splits, it's Gewürztraminer and Riesling. So two very aromatic varieties, but two very different aromatic varieties, and normally not blended together over here in New Zealand. But man, I mean, they work really well together. They bring completely different things to this wine. So Riesling, can be racy, good acidity, fresh, citrusy characters, perhaps. Gewürztraminer, more exotic, lower acidity, really, really textural. And so when you line those things up, they're almost at either end of the spectrum. The interesting thing when you bring them together, they don't cancel each other out. They actually bring the best of all these elements together. So you get some beautiful poised acidity, but you still get this textural element. So they do work really well together. But yeah, it was great. Thinking back now that the conversation we had, just pre-vintage 2016, Ray, and we were discussing aromatic varieties, and you really encouraged me to have a crack with this one. So no, it's been something that it's just been a joy to make, to be honest. And if it's provided people with something new to drink as well, then I think that's great. Really, just broadening the wine horizons for Angels, because there's a lot of great wine out there to try.
Absolutely, you're right, and red wines often take the fore of discussion or positioning, and so, but and we have some fantastic white wines from around the world. I was tasting Bruvert Ratz's Bushvine Chenin Blanc. There's fantastic again from South Africa, Richard Kershaw's Elgin Chardonnay. And it's when you, and Gerd Stepp in Germany, all of his whites basically, but when you see the quality and the equilibrium of a white wine, and just how that lifts the palate, and it is the sum of all parts. It is everything at the right time in the right place, and it's a bit like, it's a bit like people as well, and music, when you blend not just the different instruments, but the different people. Dionne Warwick, that's what friends are for. And she has Stevie Wonder, and she has Elton John on there, and all of their sounds, it's Elton John, and it's Stevie Wonder, it's Dionne Warwick, but it together is this one song. It just sort of lifts it, and that is the joy of blending grapes, whether in Châteauneuf de Pape it's Grenache and Syrah and Mourvèdre, but here I think, like you said, you have to have a go at it. You have to recognize the elements of Riesling, the qualities and the virtues of Gewürz, and she'll be right. Have a crack and she'll be right. But if you know the basics, what will probably marry up in the end. And you said they're pretty much even 50-50, but you could always go 60-40 or something. And you've nailed it. But I've followed this one with great glee over the years because of the sort of new flavor and texture. It's just this new organoleptic sensation that it's created, and I don't wish to overhype it for anyone tonight if you haven't already tasted it, but it's good white wine. It's good white wine making, which is not easy, and yeah, it's very well made.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ray. And I mean, I must say that the approach to making all these wines is really with a light touch. So it's trying to tread quite lightly through the winery, because every time you do something to the wine, it's another fork in the road, and if you're able to minimize that, then you really allow all of the grape to speak. So it's a really fun one to do, and yeah, hopefully we'll continue on with it. Yeah.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely. So we have then your Riesling. And we call it the Crush Riesling. It started off as a project where we said, you know, I think it was like it was a pitch from you going into the 2018,
17? Yep.
17. That's what I said. 17 harvest, and basically we asked Angels to, you know, should we do it? Should we back it? And all the votes came in, and we cracked into it. But it's not a dry Riesling, nor is it a sweet Riesling. So how can you position it? And ideally, if you had a benchmark, something to relate it to, so people who aren't tasting it at home or who haven't tried it could understand it a bit. And how does it balance?
Yeah. So just to give people an idea on Riesling in our region, historically it's been made off dry or medium, and that is
What's
because
that mean, Dom? Sorry, Dom.
Yeah.
What does off dry mean?
Yeah, so off dry means there's a little bit of naturally retained sweetness in the wine. So that's natural sugar in the grapes that wasn't fermented right through. And so by leaving a little bit in there, you allow the wine to be balanced against the acidity. That's generally the aim of leaving some natural sweetness in the wine. And you see that in places like the Mosel and the Rheingau as well, perhaps in Germany. And so our region has largely been built around Rieslings of that style. Perhaps more recently, over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been more drier wines made, largely in a response, I guess, to how well they go with food, and also I guess, connecting with the international market that likes that slightly drier style. So this Riesling, as Ray said, is not bone dry, but then it's not medium sweetness either. So there's, what I like to say, there's kind of a lick of fruit sweetness. Different people will pick it up differently. We all have different thresholds. But the key for me is really to have that balance with natural fruit acidity as well. And so I think it really delivers on that. And Riesling is also a wine that will evolve quite a lot in the bottle. So locally, we pride ourselves on the fact that Riesling here will age well. I know for a lot of people, half an hour is about all it gets before we open it, and I'm the same at home. But sometimes there's a bottle that gets forgotten, and you discover it a few years later, and the flavors that come in over the following years can be really exotic and quite beautiful.
Yeah, you're right. I think, Dom, you shared one of the Venice gifts of the world is if you can force yourself to forget about one bottle of Riesling or two bottles of Dom's Riesling, just put it away. And I opened a bottle of Gerd Steps Pfalz Riesling 2014 a month or two ago. So that's 6 years of aging, and that's long, but not really so long with regards where aged Riesling can go. But it was just incredible. It was such a sensation, just like the flavors, the new flavors. So the flavors you taste today and you like this wine, but you sort of invest in what will come. In fact, in the Fine Wine Club, we have a Fine Wine Club, and it goes out quarterly. And this October case, or just passed. So have you heard of, Dom, have you heard of Osler in North Otago in the South Island?
Yes. Yeah. They're a really great producer down there. Quite a cool climate, but incredible soils, a lot of limestone.
Yeah.
And just stunning wines.
Yeah, we picked up a parcel of 2013 Riesling from them, and it went out in the Fine Wine Club, and the flavors are unbelievable, just fantastic. And it is also off dry. I'd say yours is even drier than their off dry, but basically just to say, this wine, I can't remember, is it $10.99, $11.99? Just take two bottles and put it somewhere dark and cool, so not on top of the fridge, and but under the stairs or wherever, and then just crack it on a Tuesday night, and it will blow your mind. Amazing flavors. It's lovely. So we have gone through the whites, which have been a total gem. We're going to have a quick look at the reds, just because you make great Pinot Noir. and we will just touch on them. And I would just love to share or get your view. How, let's say, you've got your Pinot Noir, this Pinot Noir, and you have the Podocarp. And just on a high level, and in the interest of time, because I'm very keen to take some questions from people who are attending. So we're on the 2018 regular. So it's very pale, and I noticed comments on the wall as well, people commenting on how pale it is. So would you just be able to put some background to that, please?
Yeah. I think Pinot Noir is naturally a very light coloured red wine. So the skins are very thin, which is part of what makes it quite a tricky grape to grow, because they can be susceptible to disease, etc., because of that thinness. And also the tannins form differently, and the tannins are what helps to stabilize the color. So completely different mechanisms going on compared to, say, a Syrah or a Merlot. And so we expect Pinot Noir to be lighter than other varieties. But what I love about Pinot Noir is that, this color, yeah, sure, it's, it's quite light. It's cherry-like in color. So, yeah. But the layers and the interest on the palate can completely, be an opposite direction to what you might think when you first look at the wine. And I think, and wine shows are getting better at this as well, worrying less about the color with Pinot Noir. Yeah. Sure, color is a sensory thing, and it can be quite exciting to see something so vivid. But there's other varieties that do that, and Pinot Noir is not about the color. It's about the texture elements and the subtle complexities, and how well it goes with food because of those complexities as well.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, because let's say the home of Pinot Noir would be Burgundy and the hallowed ground, and you've these sub-appellations, little appellations, Givry, Marsanne. I mean, they're totally pale water. They're so light, Pinot Noir, but they're incredible. Von Romane is quite light, and it's more about the sensation. And I can still taste this. The length is incredible. But your Podocarp, somewhat in contrast, the 2019, and I think this is probably vintage related, but the Podocarp, 2019, this is a bit more depth, a bit more black cherry fruit and oak spice. Would that be fair to say? This is a step up?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is from a different vineyard, two different vineyards, and this is more at the premium end. And so this vineyard is organically grown, certified organic vineyard, and it produces very small bunches with slightly thicker skins because of how they manage the vineyard. But 2019 was a small vintage as well, and quite a dry vintage. And when we have a dry vintage, it means that the weather is dry and that the grapes are quite small, which brings concentration to the wine.
Yeah.
So we're getting less fruit per vine, more concentration, and just aged with a little bit more new oak as far as new barrels. And because of that richness, more complexity is allowed to come in to the wine as well. So I'd say the first one is a lovely Pinot Noir to drink with lighter foods, and to not worry or get too geeky about it necessarily. Whereas this Podocarp is really a Pinot that will age well and will stand up to quite robust food because of the vintage 2019 being quite strong.
Yeah, awesome. And it, just as I had mentioned, the Fine Wine Club for Osler, but now we're talking about Pinot Noir. Your wine, Forager, will be in the next Fine Wine Club case, which is mid-December. But just very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, but the craziness of you make the wine in the vineyard for that wine. Is that right?
That's right. So it's normal to bring your grapes into the winery building to ferment it and make it. But for Forager, it's fermented outside in the vineyard. So spends 1 month after it's been picked in a small tub, in a fermenter out there, going through a natural fermentation to really get that sense of place to allow the natural yeast to perform the fermentation. So Yeah, very different, very expressive of place. And for those people that want to go on a bit of a journey, a bit of a ride with their Pinot Noir, then yeah, it's one to try for sure.
You're all about having a go, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I'm happy to dip my toe in.
Yeah, you have to. Well, I mean, it's paid off. You were winemaker of the year in 2018 as well, 2011 and then 2018, and people are just following your, I guess it's your intuitive connection to the vineyard and the fermentation and the wine. And that is artisan, if ever there was. It comes with risks of, but it is allowing things to go, I don't know, quite naturally and holistically, probably. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to stay connected to the vineyard, and I think if you have a genuine connection to where the grapes are growing, then some of the burden can be released off your shoulders, and you can really just let that place sing, like we were talking about with the Wyatta Pinot Gris. But yeah. It's wonderful, and who knows, where the next adventure will be with wine as far as experimentation. But there will be things, I'm sure, as that kind of understanding just grows. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah, well, actually, that almost brings us seamlessly to, you contacted me, was it last week or the week before, and you've come across this Merlot vineyard. Right. And so we've looked at your beautiful whites, and let's say you're a champion of white wines and then master of Pinot, but there's another grape, Merlot, a new vineyard. Can you just tell us briefly, and then it'd be great. Perhaps we haven't committed to this, we don't know whether we should or not, but just tell us a bit about this limited production Merlot.
Yeah, so small vineyard near to where I am, about 500 meters away. They grow Pinot Noir, Gewürztraminer, and Merlot. So I'm getting the other two varieties for the wines I already do with Naked Wines. So, and working with an old colleague of mine who's a really great viticulturalist. She's leasing this vineyard. It's about 20-year-old vines, so nicely established, and about a third of it is planted to Merlot, which is fairly rare in our region. Some of the earlier plantings were planted to Merlot as people followed the Bordeaux, I guess, varieties. So established vines, and when you see these vines, you see the trunks are quite, they're like bigger. I've got a skinny forearm, bigger than my forearm, but really substantial vines that really provide a wine that's also substantial, I guess. And so, previously the wine has been had a nice sort of robust fruit and rustic kind of combination. And what I'd really love to do in combination with her is be able to produce a wine that's still got that richness, but expresses some lovely Merlot, plum, cassis-like even characters, and just with a trace of that sort of local complexity that we get, which can be more around kind of fennel sort of character just underlying the wine. So it's exciting for me, because again, it would be trying something slightly new for me. I've been all about white wines, aromatics, and Pinot Noir. Merlot would be a new adventure, but it'd be something I'd be really keen to do. So yeah, I guess we'll
we'll keep the spot now. You were selling it in by email last week, and well, I guess I raised it, but why don't we? I guess, why don't we just put it out, a mini poll, a vote to everyone who's attending. So it's pretty much, it's related to where you source some of the fruit already, so we can sort of expect similar quality.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's where I get Gewürztraminer and Pinot Noir from. So the Gewürztraminer that would go into the bloom, and the Pinot Noir that would go into the first of the two Pinots that we purchased. That's I guess potentially that Pinot Noir that I get. Sorry, I'm just going to move. I've got the the quiz has just come up. I'm just in my.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
It'll disappear again in a sec. Yeah.
So look, I think the Merlot can be crafted into a wine that has that same textural element, has those layers, and you know, like I was saying, it's also about a relationship with the grape grower, the viticulturalist as well, and you know, Miranda worked with her for about 9 years until last year. You know, and she's super experienced, and she's looking to manage this organically as well, although it won't be certified because that's her background. So, so I think we can do something really, really great. But in really small quantities, you know, would maybe total up to 200 cases or 250, somewhere between there.
Okay, so it's a limited production, high quality, organically farmed Merlot. Great. Well, the results are in, and 92%. That's pretty strong. I think actually it's probably the strongest we've ever had in a poll on here. So thank you for everyone who did vote. As per the discussions we were having, Dom, it would be 2021 harvest, so that's sort of March, April, fermentation, maturation. So we might see that middle of 2022. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So you
3-month journey by boat, and yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we might still be talking by then, so we should. We'll move on to in terms of raise empties. There were not a lot to taste. I had a quick look at Christian Patat Salis Salento Reserva, which looked great. And what else did I have? A couple of new wines, new Pouilly Fumé on there for Antoine Bourrier. And what else? Oh, I would just like to tell you that as we run into Christmas, Denis Crespo who makes he's based in Kiran in the south of France. He has a new Châteauneuf du Pape that hopefully will be coming online in the next week or so. So where we have Jade de Brézy from Frédéric Maillet, there's a Châteauneuf du Pape. It's on that sort of lighter, it's on sandy soil, red fruit Grenache. Then Denis Crespo has a sort of a more bolder Châteauneuf du Pape that's about to land, if that's your bag, and you'll see it soon. And the reason why I sort of move swiftly through that rather than taking you over to the site is because I'm very keen to take some of the questions that have been thrown in here for Dom. So I'll scroll to the top, if I may. It's an apt way to kick us off, but a question from Gordon Barber. Can you produce a wine that kills all viruses?
I wish I could.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on from that, but it's a thank you for setting the scene there. So what does Waipa Canterbury do that other regions don't in New Zealand? This is and how does it influence your wine? This is from Shig.
Okay, yeah, great question. So we are a cool climate. If you can imagine Waipara as a valley with hills on the east and west side that meet on the north. So we're open to the south. Okay. The south is where we get all the cold weather from. So we're open to cold weather coming up, which helps to regulate, but also means that in this time of year, for example, we can go from 30 degrees one day to 13 the next day. So we have ups and downs, less settled perhaps than, say, Marlborough. So what that tends to do is bring a level of concentration and we think also complexity to the wine as well. The hills on the west are really the Southern Alps, and so we get a lot of hot air coming over from Australia. The hot air picks up moisture across the Tasman Sea, drops it on the mountains, and then really speeds up like the foehn winds and comes across our valley and really dries out the valley. So we are one of the driest parts of New Zealand, and although we can have some of the coldest temps in summer, we've also got records for the highest temps into the 40s in New Zealand. So it's a real place of extremes. There's a kind of a beautiful harshness, if you can understand what I'm talking about there, and that can come through as far as a robust nature to the wine. So we're not all about fruit, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's fantastically. I can see exactly where you are. Another question, which we may have, well, I guess you could just summarize sort of what you just said there from our mayor. Is Wyatta more akin to Marlborough or Central Otago in terroir, style, etc.?
Yeah, common question I get when I'm around overseas. We're quite different to both, which I know is not a very satisfying answer. But Central Otago has a lot of exuberant fruit. I guess I'm thinking, say, Pinot Noir here, and Marlborough is kind of more subtle red fruits, perhaps. Wyatta, we tend to have a combination of both, but probably have more of a natural complexity to the wines, like a dried herb element. Partly that's the philosophy of the winemakers as well. But for those people that also know another small region in the North Island called Marlborough,
Roddy Stope used to make great Pinot Noir from there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that is where I see most similarity with Wyatta and Marlborough as far as the structure of the wines and character of the red wines.
That's very useful. That's good to know. Another question, there's plenty of questions. Tracy, what's the difference between Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris, and how do they compare?
Okay. Pinot, it's the same grape. It's technically the same wine, but it's a different style. We call it Pinot Gris with our style because it has a richness, a textural element to it. Pinot Grigio, which is commonly the northern Italian style, is lighter, kind of slightly racier, easier drinking style. So I guess Alsace provides the traditional model of Pinot Gris being rich and textural. So they're the two traditional styles of the same grape. And New Zealand generally, more often than not, goes towards that Pinot Gris style, but increasingly there's a few Grigios coming out of New Zealand.
Yeah, I agree with that. I in red, you might say Syrah and Shiraz. I mean, it's the same grape. Those that want to identify with Syrah is like that northern Rhone, maybe not light, but sort of medium body, a little bit peppery. And then Shiraz is the Barossa, the deep, round, deep. So even in South Africa, where it's sort of like where the two worlds meet, you have Syrah or Shiraz. So it's stylistic. It's almost an indicator to the drinker, what you're buying into. Yeah, absolutely. So a question from Alex: are there any differences in the character flavor in the 2020 bloom? Any differences in the character flavor in the 2020 bloom? I'm guessing versus the 2019, or things to point out of the 2020 bloom.
Yeah. So as a quick comparison against the 2019 approach, winemaking, everything was the same from that point of view. So there is a vintage element that will speak in the wine. 2019 had some very rich fruits. So perhaps on the palate that richness was slightly more evident in 19. 2020 was a vintage that I absolutely loved for whites because had such beautiful present acidity that was still ripe. And so I think the acidity plays a slightly more prominent role in the 2020. So the length of the wine is exacerbated from that point of view, and helps to counter that Gewürztraminer textural element, like we'd always expect. But that is probably the key difference. I think the 2020 bloom at the moment is showing a nice combination of those two varieties, but as the wine starts to age, maybe 6 months down the track, you'll start to see a little bit more of the complexity of those varieties come in. So a little more honeycomb, perhaps, or a little bit more musk. character coming through. So yeah, not wildly different from 2019. I am conscious to keep them a level of consistency, but I think that acidity just providing a little extra freshness on the palate, perhaps in 2020.
Awesome. Good. And I hear, yeah, 6 months in bottle, that musk, that a little bit more exotic from the raciness, what it's looking like now. That makes a lot of sense. It's delicious wine. We still have time for a question from Simon Fisher, Archangel. How are you doing, Simon? Dom, which wine from another naked winemaker is your favorite and why?
Yeah. Well, that's why I love tour, because I get to taste them all. So I'm gonna go back a year and a half or so, and there's a bunch. I mean, I really was loving what Mike was doing with his Native and Light. That was the name of the Sauvignon?
That's right. Mike Patterson in Marlborough. He makes Lay of the Land, Mike Patterson. Yeah.
And so there was a Sauvignon that he was working with that I guess was a little bit more subtle. It had a little bit more earthiness, and I think to create a wine like that is quite clever, because naturally that region just gives so much expression, which he already packages up beautifully in other wines. But this was...
Tom, can I just check? You flew to the other side of the world, tasted all these wines, and you chose as your favorite a wine from New Zealand, not even from the North Island of New Zealand, from the South Island. Okay, 3 hours away. Okay, and anything else, vaguely different than your own country?
Yeah. Okay, there were others. I'll be honest. So some of Dom Hentel's wines, I love the access that he has to making wines out of Burgundy. And also the guys who were making a beautiful Chablis, and I've forgotten the name of the winemaker there, who I actually met on my very first tour. So it has been like 4 years, but it was him and his brother.
Sebastian Christoph.
Yeah, and just lovely, lovely chalkiness to the palate. Probably the wine that stands out for me in Europe, however, is Gertz wines. As a fellow producer of similar varieties, I think the tightness but expression in the same manner that he manages to deliver is his wines are exquisite, and I think there's a real purity to them, and a bit like the man himself, he has this. You feel comfortable drinking those wines, but they also provide a lot of interest, a lot of sparkle. So I think any of Gert's wines, absolutely fantastic, Simon. So, and I'm sure you're familiar with them too, but I love to drink those.
Yeah, they're well said. Yeah, there's a lot of love for Gert Stepp. And we're going to take this one last question as we are about to wrap up, but it's a good question from Dave Young. Hi, Dom. Sauvignon Blanc can be very in your face from an aromatic perspective. I am personally a great fan of Albarino right now. What do you think an equivalent would be from New Zealand?
Yeah, it is a great question, and it's a question people are asking themselves over here as producers of wine, because we don't want to be a one-trick pony, I guess, have other varieties, and Albarino is getting a foothold here in New Zealand slowly, but it's a really beautiful expression from New Zealand. I think the other variety in New Zealand that's slowly getting a foothold but is doing some lovely things is Chenin Blanc, and I think it's a variety that can be made in a range of styles, but typically here people are tending towards that very dry style, and just enough fruit to give you, I guess, some access to the wine as you smell and drink it. But it's all in the texture, and I think it's a maturing of the New Zealand wine scene that is allowing us to delve into those other varieties. And I totally get where you're coming from with Albarino, and we see that over here as well. And Chenin Blanc would be the other one that's kind of joining Albarino in that march towards providing something new from New Zealand.
Very good, lovely. And there were similar questions. I think it might be covered, Russell and John, with regards to the bloom. We've covered, as we said, as we joined each other, Dom, earlier on, this hour will fly, and I feel it has. There's been too much talking, not enough drinking. But it's been a pleasure. It's been so good to really, I don't know, well, to revisit some of these wines, like the bloom from the early stages, hear about the Merlot that it'll be a slow project, but I'm sure it will be a fantastic wine. And it's just good to hang out, man. It's I missed you on the bus, and we will meet again as the anthem goes. Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Thank you everyone who's tuned in, Facebook, Instagram, and Zoom. And there will be more, thankfully. But Dom, this has been a beaut. Also great to sort of put white wines front and focus on the map, because the quality is excellent. So
thank you, Ray, and thank you to all the angels. It's as Ray said, I've missed you all the tour this year, and hopefully next year, we can share a glass together in person. But in the meantime, I hope you're all safe and well. And great to chat, Ray. Thanks, mate.
It's been great,
and
my buddy.
I've got a half glass here, so I'm probably going to have to finish it.
Yeah. You are, come on, man. It's 10 a.m. Okay. All right. Take care, my good man. Sloan. See you.
Bye-bye.
See you.